All right, Chapter 20, Section 3. Geographic issues in Russia. What are some of the defining characteristics of Russia today? How does ethnic turmoil challenge Russia? What methods of transportation are common in Russia? What economic and environmental problems does Russia face? These are the key questions of the chapter. Some other ideas we'll talk about are the black market and the ruble. Almost three-fourths of Russia's people live in large cities, while traditional ways of life continue in rural areas. During the Soviet era, housing shortages in the cities were common, and several families often had to share an apartment. People are again free to enjoy the arts and music that had been censored by the Soviet authorities. Despite economic problems, many Russians enjoy concerts, opera, and ballet performances. So, housing shortages, why do you think that happened? What brainstorm possible reasons that there was a housing shortage in Russia? Well, think about it. What kind of economy did they have? Who was making the decisions, right? It wasn't made by the market, by individuals. It was made by the government alone. Ethnic turmoil. Okay, so whenever you have a lot of different ethnic groups together, sometimes they don't get along. Thus, the turmoil. About 25 million residents of Russia belong to non-Russian ethnic groups, a sizable number of whom are from closely related Slavic groups like Ukrainians and Belarusians. The Caucasus region in southern Russia has the most unsettled collection of ethnic groups. Chechnya declared independence in 1991 and fought a guerrilla war against invading Russian forces for 3 years until forcing a ceasefire. The lull in fighting ended when Chechen forces started bombing Russian civilians in Dagestan, provoking another Russian invasion of Chechnya. Dagestan, with about 2 million people, has more than 30 ethnic groups, each with its own language. Okay, and if I had a map of Dagestan here, you could see this tiny area with all these people and all these different ethnicities and languages. It can get really confusing. But that is this region over here, right? These little Russian, because on this side we'll have the Caucasus nations, but we're still talking about Russia, so we're right down in here through this little isthmus between the Caspian and Black Sea. You have these nations of Chechnya and Dagestan. And this is this is a transportation. Okay, the important thing to relate here, do you see the red lines on the map? Okay. And all of these are leading to Moscow, right, and St. Petersburg. These are lines for railroads. Railroads are a cheap source of transportation compared to trucking, especially when you're in a rough terrain, right, like Siberia. So one of the most important things to remember is the thousands of miles of railroads the Russians have from the east to the west there. Okay, so they have 93,000 miles of rails in Russia. It's a practical alternative to pipelines for shipping oil. The Great Trans-Siberian Railroad, completed in 1904, runs across some 5,700 miles from Moscow to Vladivostok on the Sea of Japan. So very important transportation route. So they use pipelines for oil, but they also use, and they move people too, right? They move people and they move goods and services. So all the way from here, Vladivostok, all the way to Moscow in the west. All right, Russia's size and harsh climate make it difficult to maintain a good transportation system. Road and air travel are impractical. Remember, it's cold. Rivers historically have been important trade routes, even though most are frozen during the long Russian winters. Okay, so remember we talked about the trucks driving on the rivers? Railroads are the most extensive and inexpensive, that is very important, y'all, transportation system in Russia, and a practical alternative to pipelines. So the money thing, that is very important for railroads. It's a lot cheaper to ship via rail than via truck. Economic environmental problems. Okay, Russia and later we'll learn about China, but Russia doesn't have a very good record on the environment. Okay, economic problems first though. When Russian leaders lifted price controls, prices skyrocketed, and the ruble, which was their currency at the time, I guess it still is, plummeted in value. Okay, so the ruble is like the dollar. So when they lifted their price controls, prices went through the roof, and the value of a ruble went downwards. So it made everything more expensive, and what you were using to buy them with was worth less. So not good for the consumer. The black market has grown as a result of financial instability. You usually find much more black market activity where you have more unstable countries. Okay, the attempts at privatization, remember perestroika, often faltered because of corruption or inefficiency. Faltered means what? Failed, right? As a result of rising inflation and unemployment, the standard of living has dropped. Okay, so when prices are going up and people don't have jobs, you have less money to enjoy a life, so to speak. So your standard of living has gone down. The quality of healthcare has declined, and life expectancies, how long you can expect someone to live, have dropped quite a bit. So, going from communism to a free market economy wasn't a simple like switch. Like it wasn't like you snapped your fingers and everything was changed. There are some problems. It's not as easy as you might think. Even though we in the West tend to think that we have the better system, 80 years of communism is hard to overcome overnight. And it's been 20 years now since they switched. Environmental problems, intense industrialization, that is the building up of industries, right? Depleted resources and damaged the environment. So they've taken away resources like, say, forests and other things that you dig out of the earth, and in their wake they've damaged the environment. For example, a lot of times when you dig for gold, you have byproducts that are poisonous to life on Earth. Okay, um, a common byproduct of gold mining is arsenic, and if you get a big arsenic leak into a lake, you have a lot of dead animals. Many Siberian cities rank among Russia's most polluted cities. Okay, that's the eastern side. Remember, the place where most people don't want to live because it's very harsh, and now we're learning it's very polluted. In some areas, lung cancer and respiratory infections occur in children at an alarming rate. Industrial pollution threatened to harm bodies of water beyond repair. There are some that they thought this will never be usable again. Okay, the country lacks people with technical expertise to address past problems, and economic troubles make environmental concerns a lower priority. So when you have really big economic concerns, the environment tends not to get much attention because there are bigger fish to fry, so to speak. That means people are more worried about their pocketbook before whether a endangered species is going to die because you're not taking care of the environment. So the people think of themselves first. Section 3. What alternative pipelines does Russia use to transport oil from Siberia? We just talked about it. What happened after Russian leaders lifted price controls when they tried to become a free market?